Faith, family, freedom, brothers and sisters, I am back. I can't say stronger than ever. Going through my tribulation, it is what it is. But I'm back, and I'd like to talk about Matthew chapter 24. I want to actually get into the book of Revelation. For the last 6 months, I've been going through a lot of eschatology. I've been going through a lot of the apocalyptic parts of the Bible, Daniel, Ezekiel, Zechariah, just Revelation. In the New Testament parts of it, Paul's teachings. With that being said, I've been struggling a lot because for many, many years I believed one thing, and now I'm having to really take a hard look at what I believe and just deal with it. You may get cat bombed. I'm trying to keep my cats out of here, but they don't understand that, so I gotta show them off. But with that being said, I've been trying to deal with the Revelation and what it really means, because there's a lot of stuff going on. We got the Iran war, we had the Afghan war, we've had, the Iraq war. America's been in war since America's been around. I can't think of a time in my life when we haven't been at war, which is amazing. So anyways, we're going to get into the Antichrist. I want to start there because I want to describe who he is, because the Bible actually tells us who the Antichrist is. And it's very interesting who tells us and when he uses the word and when he doesn't use the word. With that being said, let's get into it. Now, you can see by the board behind me, it said, who is the Antichrist? Let's read together 1 John chapter 2, verse 18. All right, now, it says, little children, it is the last time, and as you have heard, that the Antichrist shall come. Even now, there are many Antichrists, whereby we know it's the last time. So, John says the Antichrist is going to come, and there are many Antichrists. So is the Antichrist one person? Is he several different people? Is he going to be one at the end of the world? Is he going to be some United Nations leader with a laser scanner and a microchip and a satanic Costco membership? I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? You get double points if you're extra evil, so think about that. But, that's interesting because it doesn't have to be. And one of the things that I'm very interested in is that John is he's the only disciple. He is the only disciple that actually uses the word Antichrist. He's the only one. Jesus doesn't even use it. Paul doesn't use it. And Paul wrote more books of the Bible than anybody else, but John is the only one who uses the word Antichrist. And here's an interesting twist. He never uses the word in Revelation. Not one time. He never uses the word Antichrist in Revelation. He uses the word beast. Now, am I saying the Antichrist is not in Revelation? No. Can a theological point be made that the beast in Revelation 13 is the Antichrist? Probably. You could use some. Does that mean the beast is the Antichrist? No. Not when you compare it to Daniel. Not when you read it alongside the books, because here's the interesting thing about Revelation when you read it. Everybody thinks that the book of Revelation was actually written 2,000 years ago for us now. It wasn't. It was written 2,000 years ago for the believers living then. When if Paul died in 65 AD, somewhere around in there. The book of Revelation was written in 90 AD, so he died some 25 years before John wrote the book of Revelation. But if Paul would have been alive, being a Pharisee, being of the tribe of Benjamin, being taught by I think he was taught by Gamaliel, one of the top Pharisees in all of Israel. So if Paul would have been alive during that time, he would have known exactly what John was talking about. He would have been able to expound on that book profoundly, because he would have been able to point to the Old Testament and look at what was going on around him at that time. And that book would have been just as relevant for him then and them then as it is for us today. So when you read Revelation, you have to read it in a time frame of what did the first century church believe about this. So when you talk about prophetic things, apocalyptic Bible verses, you have to say, what did the believers back then actually believe? How did that affect them? What did they think when they read it? What was the importance they got out of it? And that's how you make Revelation relevant to you today. Because you have to understand that Revelation was written for all people at all time. It was just as important and just as relevant then. So when John says that there was Antichrist in the world, he said there are many Antichrists, whereby we know this is the last time. So there's already Antichrists in the world. Oh, by the way, just so you know, my daughter do this. So if you see these animes up here, my daughter did that. So I'm a single dad now, so I have my daughter with me, and she's the one that put it up there. She's the artist. I'm not the artist. If I was to draw people, they would look like stickmen. I can't draw. The only thing I can draw is unemployment. But anyways, the Antichrist may not be one individual. It could be. I'm not saying it's not. And when we get into Revelation, you're going to see what I'm talking about. But it doesn't have to be. Now, let's go into 1 John chapter 2, verse 22. Now, he's going to give a definition here of who is the Antichrist. Who is a liar, but he that denies Jesus is the Messiah. He is Antichrist that denies the Father and the Son. So, what is Antichrist? Antichrist is a denier. Antichrist is one who denies who Christ is, that he's come in the flesh, and he denies that he's the Messiah. He is Antichrist. So there's a lot of, that's why John said there are many Antichrists. The spirit of Antichrist runs around, all over the place. So Antichrist isn't just one, like I said, evil person with the, 666 on a triangle on the back of his neck, running around with a satanic microchip and barcode trying to get you into evil memberships. That's not what Antichrist is. And we're going to get into the mark, because you're going to find some interesting things. When I get into Revelation 13, we're going to actually look at what the mark is. The mark isn't what we think it is. And you're going to be astounded, because I did a lot of reading on the book of Revelation, but I went back to what the early church fathers taught. What did they think? How were they looking at the book of Revelation? How would it have impacted them? What would they have heard? Pardon me. What would they have heard when they were reading this book? I'm going to take a swig of coffee, if you don't mind, real quick here. Yes, I drink coffee. I was diagnosed with ADHD. As a matter of fact, I'm like riddled with it. Somebody hit me with like a couple shotgun blasts of it. So I'm like Swiss cheese version of ADHD. I didn't know that. It was kind of like, oh, wow, that's kind of neat. But anyways, so when we look at, when Paul wrote, or when John wrote the book of Revelation, and he gave it to the churches, and he had it read among the churches, how did they interpret it for them then? So let's look at John 1 John chapter 4, verse 2 through, I think it's 2 through 3. Yes, 2 through 3. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is of God. And every spirit that confesses not that Jesus is come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of Antichrist, whereby you have heard that it should come, and even now already is in the world. So the Antichrist was in the world at the time that John wrote his book. So he was already there, working, already denying that Christ is. So the Antichrist, by definition, is anyone who denies that Christ is the Messiah, that he came in the flesh. And that goes really, really well when we get into Revelation about the false prophet. Because the false prophet is going to lead people away from Christ, or he's going to lead people in a different way. But when we talk about Antichrist, don't hyper focus on one super villain, some satanic super villain. Don't do that. Okay, focus on what John said in his epistles. Focus on how he defined it, because he was the only one that actually talked about what an Antichrist is. So when we go into Revelation and we talk about the beast, and and it's interesting. Think about this. Okay, now think about this. In Revelation 13, we're talking about the apostle, the only apostle to ever use the word Antichrist. He's the only one. And he did not use that word when he's describing the beast in Revelation. He called him the beast, not the Antichrist. He called him a false prophet, but not an Antichrist. Not saying he wasn't an Antichrist. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that he could have used the word because he's the only one that has ever used the word. The question I'm bringing up is, why didn't he? And that's what we got to look at. So, who really is the beast? Who really is the false prophet? And we're going to get into that later on. But if you have any ideas in there, put them in the comments. Do me a favor, like, share, subscribe. Put this out to people in your church. Let them see what's going on. I'm just a humble fisher of men, just like any other regular guy out there. And I'm just trying to give people the truth. So, take a look at this and tell me what you think of it. And leave your comments in the bottom. Thank you very much. Share this with other people that you feel they could use this. And we'll see you on the next video.